You ever been so convinced that you had to do something you knew you shouldn't do because you had no choice? Good morning. Welcome to Coffee and the Word. As we work through the book of Genesis, we find ourselves being introduced to a new character. And in Genesis chapter 12, his name is Abram. And if you're a student of the Bible, you probably remember a guy named Abraham, and that's who he becomes. He is renamed Abraham later. Not important right now, because the Bible introduces him this way. He introduced us who he was born of, who he married, and then in chapter 12, this is the first time we actually get to hear his story, or we begin to hear his story. In verse 1, it says, "The Lord had said to Abram, 'Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you.'" And so, just real quick, his first encouragement, or his first command, the first thing God tells him is, "Look, Abram, I got things for you to do. I need you to get up. I need you to leave your home. I need you to leave your house. I need to leave your land. I need you to go to this new land. And this new land is going to be a special land." He doesn't get into this, but later he does. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." And the really cool thing about this story is Abram goes. In fact, the next verse says, "So Abram went as the Lord had told him. And he took some stuff, and they took off, and they headed out into the land that he would be shown." And during this process of his leaving and his going in the blessing of God, in the promise of God, and I can imagine how it went down, right? It's kind of like that conversion moment, right? As you get to know God, you're on fire for God. Everything is going the way it should go, and things are happening the way they should happen, and you're just in a good place, in a good way, and you're excited about what's next, and you're doing the work of God. Like, you feel good about yourself, and then something inevitably happens. Can we agree on this? Something inevitably happens to derail you. And it's not even under your control. It's not like you could have predicted it, but you're stuck with a dilemma. And that's what happens here with Abram. Listen to this in verse 10. "Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe." Now, real quick, we don't use the word famine much, but the simple thing is there wasn't any food. There was a supply shortage, to use today's terminology. There wasn't anything to eat. There wasn't anything for his animals to eat. So they traveled to Egypt for just a little while. The idea is they would come back. So there was a famine in the land. They went to Egypt, and as they entered Egypt, he said to his wife, Sarai, which later we'll call Sarah, but right now she's Sarai, "Sarai, I know that you are a beautiful woman. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." Now I want you to get what's happening here. Abraham, who's just been called out by God, well, not just, but who's been called out by God, who's been brought to this new land, who's been promised that he would be a blessing. Here's the other thing. Don't forget this one. It says, "Whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples of the earth, and all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." So there's this promise that is sitting in the background of this narrative, right? But it's not the promise that It's not the thought that Abram focuses on. The thought Abram focuses on is what a lot of us do. We do the whole thing, right? Where we look around and we're like, "Oh, it's not what, this is not going to be good. There's danger afoot." And instead of him saying, I will not be afraid because I am living under the blessing and the promises of God, and therefore I have nothing to fear, Abram's like, hey, Sarah, could you tell him you're my sister? There's a whole lot messed up about this. First of all, this Sarai is going to be the mother of many nations, or of a great nation, right? Sarah is going to be the mother of this great nation that God is going to build with Abram. And she's the promised mom. And now Abram is like, hey, I need you to tell them you're my sister. That way they don't kill me. I'm afraid of death, which is what happens to a lot of us. And I would love for Abram to be like, hey, Sarah, you're a beautiful woman. The Egyptians are going to take you. We have God's blessing. We don't have to worry about such things. We don't have to do things differently than what God told us to do because God has promised his protection and provision for us. So if they ask you, you tell them you're my wife, and we'll see what God does. That would have been a great thing. That's not what he does. So, as expected, when the Egyptians see you, say you are my sister. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw Sarai was a very beautiful woman. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. He treated Abram well for her sake. And Abram acquired sheep and cattle and male and female donkeys and male and female servants and camels. That seems still like not a great deal. Your wife is now living with Pharaoh, and you got stuff. And so I can't imagine what must have been going on through Abram's head, but it doesn't seem to me like Abram was like, hey, this worked out. I think Abram was still living in fear and having to endure, even with all of these material blessings. He's outside of what God wanted for him. He's not walking the path that God had called him to walk. He's not experiencing the blessings that God had promised until God steps in. In Abram's unfaithful lying, God steps in, and here's what God does. But the Lord inflicted serious disease on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife, Sarai. Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me? He said. Why didn't you tell me this was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her. Go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram and to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. You see, when God steps in, and God is for you, who can be against you? And here's my challenge to you. The title of today's message is, I Will Not Be Afraid. And that's really not a great title, because what I really want you to do is say, I will be courageous. Because fear is going to creep in, but perfect love casts out all fear. Fear is going to creep in, but the promises are greater than the fear or the threat. And so I want us to remember that no matter what circumstance we're in, there is an opportunity for us to walk in faithfulness, and there's an opportunity for us to walk in fear. Which way are you walking? I think as we read the narrative, we're like, Abram, God's got you, man. You don't have to lie. I really do believe that's how we see it. But then when it's in our story, it's like, but what if God forgets I'm here and he doesn't got me? I get it, but I promise you, God's got you. And you can always do what God has called us to do and experience the joy of what God has promised. I hope this helps. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Live courageously, even and especially when you're afraid. God bless you. Have a great day. This has been another edition of Coffee and the Word.